Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and co-parents of all ages, this podcast is for you. Introducing and the centering the Amicable Divorce Expert, Judith Weigel.
Joining me in centering today is Katharine Blake. She's a certified divorce coach, and Katharine can literally, with all the permutations of her career, fill up centering as a performer of many acts. I want to give you the bullet points of what she does before we bring her in and have her share her expertise. So, Katharine, 20 years ago, became a child and family psychotherapist. We do not have enough people on this show that can talk about children and how divorce affects them. But after 20 years of that, Katharine segued into being a divorce coach, and she has a team of people who work with her. Again, most divorce coaches are solo practitioners, so to speak. You are, I think, Katharine, the second person I've talked to on this podcast that has a team of professionals, which means your outreach is great and you can do so much more for people. But you were in New York City as a child and family psychotherapist, I believe, then moved back to Boston and became an anxiety coach. Okay, this killed me. Who doesn't need an anxiety coach? I do, at various times. And I guess with that, and you can correct me in a second when I release you to the audience, you went into court and you were a witness in child custody cases, a professional. You gave professional synopsis updates and released information. Then, after all of this, you became a dating post-divorce coach. Now, as if we don't need that, and we do, so that we don't pick the same people again, I really want to relate this as dating insofar as it affects the family, the children, and then we go into the blended family. So I hit the salient points, right, Katharine?
Absolutely. You know, I always laugh about the fact that I'm trying to help people contemplating going through and post-divorce. And it's a little crazy, I think, that I'm trying to do all those things, but I'm really about meeting as many needs as I can for folks that are going through that journey. It's a journey fraught with obstacles. It's not easy. There's a lot of places you can make mistakes. So I certainly made a lot of mistakes. I'm very transparent with my clients on where I wish I had done things differently. And I just want to help people navigate those transitions smoother.
So let's start there, because that's perfect. Most people get into this business as a result of their own difficulties in divorce. So this is the Amicable podcast for divorce. So in your divorce, which was about 10 or so years ago, something like
10 years ago, yeah.
And you had one child, correct?
One child, yeah.
So what were the challenges you had, and how did you meet those challenges so that you can help those listening meet them better in their own divorce?
Absolutely. So one thing that I love, when I tell people this, they can't believe me, but I trained, I have my MSW, and then I did postgraduate training in psychoanalysis in New York City. Very intensive training. And the only mention of divorce that I remember was that if you have a child who has divorced parents, they're more likely to be depressed or anxious. There was no education as to the legal process. There was no education as to what a parenting plan could and should look like. So, when I went through my own process, I remember specifically, my daughter was young. She was 2 when I started it, but saying to my attorney, like, what's a typical parenting plan for a 2-year-old? Like, what works? What's the least damaging to a child that age? And I remember he was like, oh, I don't know. I really don't know. He's like, you can look up this book. There might be some book. I'll go try to find it and see what I can find. So I realized there was this complete lack of information to help people make really smart, intelligent decisions for their children. And as I said, I felt like, I say this very often, like I was fumbling. I really wanted to do right by my daughter and making sure that the divorce was the least damaging part of her life as possible.
And she was 2. So there's such a difference in a parenting plan, as you now know, and it's
right.
And as I know, working in the business, there's such a difference in a parenting plan with somebody that young versus 8 years old. 12 years old.
And this is what I tell my folks all the time, because people really argue, right? Every little detail of a parenting plan. And sometimes you need to do that, particularly in a high conflict situation. The more structured the plan is, the less room there is, right, for conflict to occur. But your children keep growing. Their developmental needs keep changing. There comes a time where most kids want to spend all their time with their friends. They don't actually really care a whole lot what mom and dad are doing, And those are normal developmental milestones. And so, I tell people, like, listen, be careful of how much money and how much energy you're digging your heels in on this parenting plan, because 3, 4, 5 years down the road, your needs might change as the parent, but also your children's needs are most definitely going to change. And I think that people don't think that way when they're going through the process, because they're so, their heels are dug in. They want to win. They want to whatever their agenda is, you and I know, without accounting for the fact that life keeps moving on.
I know. And that's what I say to people when we're working out the parenting plan for present time that goes into the settlement agreement. So this is a good start because you have to have something. Right. But get ready for it to change. And then they'll say, well, then what do we do when it changes? Do we have to go back to court? You really don't. As long as you can communicate with one another, as long as you can be flexible, the court doesn't need to know. They don't care, right?
Absolutely. I mean, to me, that's a great co-parenting situation where maybe you are really sticking with the structure for the time being until the emotional dust, everything settles out, your child gets used to going back and forth. And 2, 3 years down the road, you're communicating in a nice business-like manner, and there's more flexibility, right? Because life throws us curveballs all the time. Sometimes you have sports tournaments. Sometimes school vacation has changed. Look at COVID. I mean, COVID, all of us had to be very flexible, right? And so if you have a good co-parenting situation, that flexibility is allowed in the relationship.
So how did that work for you and your former husband?
Not very well. So I'll tell you a little bit about my story. My initial divorce was, I guess, maybe I call it a garden variety, high conflict divorce, not a lot of assets, but we got through it and we were co-parenting on the other side. I published a book 5 years post-divorce around my struggles with codependency. And I was very transparent in it. I wrote about dating as a single mom in the suburbs. I wrote about my own healing journey, how I'd used Reiki, energy healing, what have you. And it was really how I broke that love addiction that I had. My ex got word of the book and sued me. And I spent 2 years in court battling for custody of my daughter. He wanted to have full custody and I would have no visitation rights. And also defamation of character. And it was after that experience, which literally took everything from me. It took, number one, my ability to be a good parent away because I was so stressed and so hypervigilant. My daughter was experiencing some parental alienation and was diagnosed with PTSD as a result of that. I lost my house, I lost friends, I lost my health, and I came out the other end of that as a social worker by my initial training. And I said, this process is really horrible and I want to see if I can make it better for others. And poured myself into growing this divorce business, which has been great. It's been booming. So it's awesome.
Why did the book affect the co-parenting relationship?
I had everything disguised. I did everything the right way. But I did most definitely talk about my marriage. And I think, I don't want to diagnose on here, but, I think for somebody who has a personality where power is very important, I think there was a desire to punish me for letting those stories out.
Before the book, was the resolution to the divorce moderately amicable, or how did you resolve the divorce before the book?
I mean, I think we got through it with some bumps. I certainly made a lot of mistakes. There was a little bit of drama that didn't need to be there. But for the most part, I think we got through the divorce fairly well. My ex remarried right away. I really liked his wife. I invited them over for holidays and dinners. And I think, we were really doing, I wouldn't say perfect. There would be flare-ups, certainly. There would be, challenging situations. But I think for the most part, we were doing pretty well.
That's really nice to hear that after the divorce, you actually liked his new wife because you have a child. So it's so very important that you like the new person, in your former spouse's life. That's very Denise Richards, if I may depart for 1 second. Yeah. So Denise Richards was on the Beverly Hills Housewives for a couple seasons, and she was talking about her divorce from Charlie Sheen. And she said that she really wanted the kids to respect him. And, the press was very cruel. It always is with high-profile couples. And she was explaining that she included him in everything. Regardless of who he was with, he had an open invitation to join them for any holiday, and even gave an example of a Thanksgiving where he wasn't sitting at the table, but the girls were and her family was, and there's a knock at the door, and it's Charlie. And she said, "Oh my gosh, come on in. It's Thanksgiving. You can join us." And he said, "Well, I have somebody with me." Now, he was known for dating women of the night. And he said, "Well, I have somebody in the car with me." And Denise looked and kind of said, "A woman of the night?" She said, "Bring her in. Everybody needs to eat. Everybody needs Thanksgiving." That's how open she was. And then again, bumps along the road. So it's just so heartwarming to hear when the other parent is allowed in the house of the other parent. I mean, it breaks my heart when parents don't go in the homes. Especially if it was the family home that stayed in place and mom got it, so to speak. Generally, mom got it. And then dad doesn't want to go in, doesn't want to step on their territory. And I kind of get that. But it just felt really cold to me every time I heard about it.
Yeah. It's hard. Co-parenting is not easy. It's a lot of putting your ego aside. And I really do, one of the things I told you is I have my couples who come to me for co-parenting coaching, and I say, bring a picture of your child. And so they'll both show up in my office or through Zoom, and they show me the picture, and I say, tell me stories about your child. And then I ask them, and I say, do you hate each other more than you love your child? And you can just feel the walls melt, right? Oh, wow. And it lets people, even narcissistic parents, I'm telling you, even the most high conflict parents, to be able to say, you know what, we've got to put the ego aside. We've got to stop fighting over right and wrong, and let's focus. What do you want your child saying to their therapist when they're 25 and 30 and they're looking to get married about how you handled the divorce? And it's really just putting that into perspective, which I understand. I've been there. When you're in divorce and you're in a tough legal battle, you're in your monkey brain. You're like hypervigilant. You're not coming at it rationally. Everything feels like a threat to you. Everything feels like a lion breathing down your neck. And it's scary. So even the most well-adjusted, highly functioning adults, have a hard time navigating all this.
That's a good circus reference. A lion breathing down your neck. I often say it feels like you're putting your head in the lion's mouth when you have to approach the other parent with maybe a change of the schedule, something different. Oh my God, some people don't handle change very well. But yes, my heart goes out to every single couple getting divorced, period, and then getting divorced with children. Because not only are you going through your own, what I call emotional divorce, the disconnecting, the forgiving of yourself, the forgiving of the other person, the reorganizing of your life for the future, but you're now still connected with co-parenting decisions. Right. And my hat goes off to everybody going through this. You're amazing people.
Yep, absolutely. And showing up for your kids, I think, is so hard when your heart is breaking.
Yes, but what you said, do you hate each other more than you love your children? What a great question to ask. May I steal that in my own mediations?
Absolutely.
Yeah. No, that's really good. Okay, so are you still a child and family psychotherapist? Do you still take clients?
So I'm doing all coaching right now. So I do get appointed cases through the court system. I'm trained as a guardian ad litem, even though I don't practice as a GAL.
Explain what that is for people listening.
So a guardian ad litem is somebody who basically provides some assessment on the family and there's two kinds. There's either a GAL who provides just what they observe in their time with the family. They spend time with the child. They spend time with the school, the pediatrician, coaches, you name it, neighbors. And they either provide what they have observed to the court, that information. And some GALs, which I'm one of them, are able to come in and provide recommendations to the court. Like, here's our observations, but we're recommending the following. And so I get appointed to cases where there's a lot of high conflict. There might be parental alienation. These might be cases where both parties have spent tens of thousands of dollars needlessly with their attorneys, and the judge is getting frustrated and they want somebody to come in and just basically help them work together. And I'm telling you, I mean, even people don't want to hear this because I do specialize in working with narcissism, but even in a situation where you have a narcissistic parent, there is a system and techniques and ways to co-parent successfully.
And that's what you do as a coach. You go through that as a coach. In the court system, I mean, people are so afraid of going to court, and sometimes it's your only option.
Right.
You know, my mediator friends say, no, Judy, mediation is the way. And I say, well, yes, ideally it is, but sometimes people just cannot make decisions and they need the court to be involved. That being said, how good is the court at being involved in a way that's helpful to the parents?
See my face?
Yeah, I know. Okay, so we're audio, not video. Wasn't a good face you made.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. I'm always educating around this. Number one is managing expectations as you go through the divorce process, because I think people have expectations that are just unreasonable and not reality-based around what divorce is. But here's the thing. The court system itself is a legal system. It's based on a black and white model. And what you're pouring into that model, because what they really look at divorce like is it's almost like breaking up a business, right? But you're taking parenting, which is full of nuances and history and flavors, right? And changes and transformations. And you're trying to pour that into a very black and white system that makes sense for the legal system. And I think that's part of the challenge. You know, it's really, really hard. I mean, here's one example. I was just talking about this with one of my clients. This is a situation. It's two parents that are actually working fairly well together to come up with their parenting plan. But one of the children prefers time with dad and the other child prefers time with mom. And so the parents very appropriately with my coaching said, hey, can we have two different parenting plans? And the attorney said, no, we won't do that.
No.
So
Really?
do you know what I mean? Like, that's what I mean. Like, there's all these different, flavors of what a family looks like and what a good parenting plan looks like and how to successfully navigate post-divorce. And I think sometimes, that ability to think outside the box, be creative, entertain different options and alternatives sometimes does get squashed a little bit with the legal process.
Okay, so I want to step in on this.
My opinion. That's not all.
No, your opinion is perfect. But so listen, this is one of the issues that I bring up. If people have to leave me, for filing or mediation and be represented by an attorney, you are still in charge of your attorney.
Oh, sure.
Your attorney doesn't tell you what to do. Your attorney will educate you about the law. But if you want two parenting plans in your settlement agreement, you get to have them.
Right.
If you know that you are in charge of your attorney. But so often, we hire attorneys because we need their help. We need their guidance. And they don't always have the ability to think outside of the box either. Right. And so you do have to just say, this is what I want in my settlement agreement.
Absolutely. That's one of the most common mistakes in divorce, right? Is giving your power away, giving it to the attorneys and or giving it to the judge. Because a lot of people will say that too, right? I'm just going to give into this agreement. When I get in front of the judge and I'm like, no. The judge doesn't have time to read your agreement. You need to have an agreement that is okay with you before you get to pretrial, is what we call it here in Mass. But
right.
Yeah.
It's also difficult. Okay, so when you were a child and family psychotherapist, and if you had cases where people are getting divorced, we have several things going on. We have the child that needs time to talk to a licensed professional so that they can share their fears.
Right.
And their concerns. And then we have parents that need to be guided so that they understand how to support their child's fears and concerns. So let's start with, what are a child's fears and concerns by and large when their parents are getting divorced?
So I will most definitely say that some of that depends on the developmental level of the child. I love to share the story of, I was working with a couple going through divorce. Sometimes I do work with both parents to help them navigate the process. And we were talking about how to present to the children that they were divorcing. And they ended up, I think the dad broke down, and there was all this detail about how, like, you know, he fell out of love. I mean, it was just way too much, right, for a 6-year-old. And the 6-year-old goes, "But Dad, I just wanted to know where my teddy bear is going to be."
Oh my God.
Like, do you know what I mean? And I think that, you know, so the parents kind of, you know, projected a little bit their own stuff. And that was not the concern of the child at all. And I also let people know that research shows children actually do better a year post-divorce than they do the year prior to divorce, because kids pick up on conflict. Like, even if it's not overt, even if it's not domestic violence, kids pick up on body energy. They pick up on eye energy, and they know on some level that things aren't quite right at home. And that's why when I was an anxiety coach, you know, I would say almost 60% of my cases would come in and I'd find out that there was trouble in the marriage, and or the family's going through divorce, and or they're just fresh post-divorce. So although they're bringing their child in for anxiety, this is what's going on in the background. And children are the symptom bearers, right? They show us through their behavior what's actually going on in the family system at large. And that's when I started to really shift my focus to, like, wow, there's this whole field of divorce and people aren't really meeting the needs of these families. And that made me want to step in and start combining some of my personal and professional work to do this. Now, if you have older kids, like, dating is a big issue, because a lot of the kids will say, you know, and I'm talking college kids, I'm worried that mom and dad's attention is going to go to the new partner and not me. And I think that's a very common concern for kids. And I'm saying from 5 to 25, I hear this.
Okay, so two things. I want to go back for a second before we focus on what you just said, because it's so important. I want to go back for a second and talk about sharing the details of why you're getting divorced with your child. So I have experienced two reasons why people want to do it. A, they think their child wants to know, and you kind of answered that already. I just want to know where my teddy bear is going to be. You know, so yes, it's a child. But number two, they want to make sure that if the other parent was possibly the cause, there was adultery, there was substance abuse, there was whatever, they want to make sure their child knows it wasn't their fault. Please comment on that.
Oh, I've had multiple cases where I've been coaching a parent and they say, well, my therapist says I should tell the kids that he had an affair. And I'm like, no. Because here's the thing, again, you have to figure, children do not have the capability of separating themselves entirely, and when I'm talking about this psychologically and emotionally, from their parents. So if you're bad talking the other parent, if you share really horrible information of the parent, now, even regardless of the behavior you see from your child, regardless of some of the words you say, underneath of it is this level. It's our subconscious, which we talk about in NLP. A lot of kids are going to say way down deep, wow, mom and dad's talking about me. Maybe I'm a jerk, right? Maybe I'm a bad person. Maybe I didn't do things right, and that's why mom and dad are divorcing. So you don't want to even open that door at all. I always coach my clients and I say, you know what, kids get older, and I do believe this. I think there's this sort of internal system that we all have, even adults, that protects us, and we deal with things when we're ready to deal with them, when we're ready to process that and can tolerate it. And I think that kids do hit that point. For some, it's 14. For some, it's 18. For some, it's 21. For some, it's 25, where they sort of have this realization, and we call this maturity in psychology, but they're also able to hold on to people being both good and bad within one person. Prior to that, it's like Disney, right? People are all good or they're all bad. And so if we're sending them even a little bit of bad stuff, they now feel the pressure to say, I got to put this parent in either the good bucket or the bad bucket. And that's a big burden to put on a kid.
It hugely is. And I, years ago, didn't understand why kids would think it's my fault. So I went to some of my therapist friends, and I just said, so why is this? And you kind of just said it, Katherine. And that is, a child's world revolves around them. They can only see it through their own eyes. So if something happens that is outside of their realm of control, like divorce, yet it affects them, I was told, as you just said, well, it's got to be my fault. I must have done something to make this happen. And parents need to know that.
Kids are, I call it healthy narcissists. They're supposed to be narcissists, right? Like, the world revolves around me, and they do feel, that everything that happens around them has a little bit to do with them.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Now, the other thing you said was, when you were talking about dating, kids worry, and you said generally when they get older, but I've experienced kids in the 6, 7, in the younger ages, when their parents start dating, and many of them have either started dating before the divorce is filed for, or start dating during the divorce, and the kids have to catch up with what this divorce feels like to them with two households and parents not in the same space. They have to get used to that. But then parents want to introduce their new partners quickly, I think out of a sense of duty or responsibility, or, hey, they're my partner, so they're going to get introduced to them, when the kids are saying, but I just need you. Can we talk about, I just need you, mom or dad?
No, I mean, I think that happens a lot. And geez, I could go on and on about doing your inner work before you enter into another long-term relationship is just so needed, because otherwise you're just repeating pattern over and over and over again, just different forms of it. I'm just going to say that. I mean, kids for a kid to navigate that transition, it's really redefining your family as a single mom family, a single dad family, a divorced family, a 2-home family, whatever you want to call it. And for a child, they have to get their feet stable on that ground for a while, to me, before you start launching into, here's somebody who could be a step parent, because that's another big transition. And if you just jump it, by the way, it's the same for adults, right? If you jump into that step, it's avoiding and numbing out the needed, necessary grief and reformulating that needs to happen in order for that to be a successful transition.
So let's just say that one parent has already gone through all the divorce stages of grief, which, by the way, are 2 more than Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's 5 stages of grief over death. Why? Because your partner is still living. So there's 2 more grieving stages. Okay, let's just say one partner's gone through this, and now they feel very stable. Maybe they've had a lot of therapy, and they're starting to make choices differently, but the divorce now takes place. This parent does have another partner. How do they assess their child's needs in terms of connecting with that parent one-on-one as a divorced parent? And then 2, when and how do you introduce the new partner into the child's life?
Again, I think, and I would take that on a case-by-case example, depending on the history, depending on how co-parenting is going. That's a big piece of it. And depending on where the child's knowledge is. I think kids these days are pretty hip. Like I tell my parents, it's okay for your child to know you're dating. Like I remember I had a dad and his phone dinged or something, and the daughter was 7 and she picked it up and she's like, "Dad, are you dating?" Because it was like a match notification. And he was like, no, I'm not dating. And he grabbed the phone and he was embarrassed, and then he called me and we had to have an emergency coaching session. And I'm like, it's okay for your kids to know that you're dating. It's okay for them to know that you're seeking out a partner. Bringing somebody home, introducing them as a parent figure is a totally different ballgame. And, and again, it's just, I do dating coaching. You don't really know somebody, in my opinion, unless you've gone through some challenges with them. You don't know someone probably for a year or 2 years. So you got to figure when you're bringing somebody in, your children might get attached, may or may not. They're certainly going to react to it. And then you do, breakups are harder post-divorce because your children are experiencing them too. So to me, it's like they already have the death with divorce because it's a death. So be cautious, be slow, have intention behind it. Date for your child. I've had situations too. Like here's an example where I had a client who was dating this gentleman, and he had real not great things to say about children with learning challenges, and her son had some learning challenges. And I said, well, why? They ended up moving in together. The relationship didn't work. And I said, he told you right in the beginning who he is. So part of dating is having your values in place and knowing you're dating for your children, and to say, that's not going to work for me. Right?
Okay. I love the phrase dating for your children. Mm-hmm. I have not heard that yet. Mm-hmm. That's very interesting to me, dating for your children. I have heard, unfortunately, the opposite. Well, am I not supposed to be happy? Why do I have to think of my child first? I have literally heard that from parents, and it breaks my heart. Mm-hmm. But dating for your children, can you explain what that process is? How do you start it? How do you go through it?
Well, I think part of it is really being clear. I want all my people to be healed when they're out there in the dating world, especially online dating, because that is a minefield of trauma right there. You know what I mean? So, it's like you need your ducks in a row. Know what you bring into the relationship. Know your values. A lot of people don't even know the top 5 values that determine their behavior, right? Know your values. Look for somebody. Here's another thing. Look for somebody who has the same thoughts around parenting. Like, I'm going to share an example. I had my daughter in Brooklyn, New York. I think there's a little bit of a different kind of flavor to parenting in Brooklyn, because when you walk outside of your brownstone and get on the train on any given day, you might see somebody who's high on drugs. You might, so it sort of was this feeling in New York of you can't really shelter your kids from all this stuff. So we talk about it at a very young age, right? You educate them around these kinds of things. I know there's that story about the 12-year-old who was on the train. I'm like, yeah, people in New York do that, When I moved up to New England, it was a very different framework. It was this kind of shelter the kids. I even had parents who were going through divorce saying, we're not going to tell our kids that we're getting a divorce. And that's what I mean. So even when I'm single, I date, I would talk to people. I would want to know how do they expose their children to the world? How do they teach them about it? Not necessarily that we have to agree 100% on everything, but my kids, she's now 15. She's pretty hip to the world. She's pretty street smart. She's sarcastic. I don't see my job as protecting her or sheltering her. I see her as more, giving her tools so that she can go out and kind of dominate the world by herself. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
So that's what I mean. It's those things. And I think that, it's just an awareness of that. I coach my women in particular, pay attention to how he's talking about parenting. Pay attention to, is he able to talk about his vulnerabilities as a parent? Because being a parent is a very vulnerable job. Or is it all superficial information? My kids are awesome. I'm awesome. My kid's great at this. My kid's great at each. My kid's beautiful. You know what I mean? Or is there an ability to kind of get beneath that and talk about the values around parenting?
And what if your new significant other has never had children? Maybe as an only child, who knows?
I don't think that's necessarily a no-go, but here's the thing, and this is my opinion. I'm telling you this as a non-therapist. I'm telling you this as somebody who's been online dating for a long time. I personally have a hard time connecting with somebody who does not have children, because I think when you have children, this, again, talk about it, it's sort of like this way of looking at the world changes. I know before I had my daughter, I was super type A, every room in my house had matching furniture. I was like OCD, and I feel like thankfully she's broken me off. But you start to shift on like what the priorities are, right? What's the important stuff? What kinds of things can you let go? What kinds of things do you really need to worry about? And so for me personally, I have found it challenging to date people who don't, but I don't think it's that way for everybody.
Okay, so you fall in love, madly in love with somebody who checks all the right boxes. They're respectful to you. They have a great job, excellent work history, not addicted to anything. You have a child. They do not. How do you put training wheels on them, so to speak, to see how this might work out if it became a permanent relationship?
Well, I think part of that is, it's educating. Like I've had to tell people, like, my daughter is my priority. My daughter plays ice hockey. So we're in the ice rink like almost every weekend, so, and sort of helping them understand that me saying no or breaking plans last minute is not because it's my intention, and it's not because that person's not valuable to me. It's just that my daughter always will come first, right? It is what it is. Now, my daughter also doesn't dictate who I date, because if that was the case, I would only be allowed to be with like Tuukka Rask or something. So that probably wouldn't work. But do you know what I mean? It's like, her needs trump. I mean, that's what it is.
So do you bring anybody, if you've been serious about somebody, do you bring them to the events with her? Do you ever do that?
Hockey? Yeah, I mean, I had one long-term relationship. I had a 3.5-year relationship where he would come with me to ice hockey and got involved in the team. Yeah, absolutely.
All right, that's cool. All right, let's go to blended families. Mm-hmm. And since I never experienced this, I'm just going to share what I think it's like, and then you can tell me why I'm completely wrong. So the reason why...
You might be completely right, though. You never are.
Well, so with blended families now, okay, let's just say the kids are calm, the divorce is over, everybody's co-parenting, this is fine. Now the parents are dating. Mm-hmm. And they want to get married. So you bring the other person into the home. My fear, if I were a kid, would be that my home is the most personal space I have, where I have to feel the most safe and protected and can walk around any way I want. And now this other human being is coming into this space. How is there an awkward stage? I kind of think I would feel awkward for a while. What's that like?
So here's the thing. I always tell blended, I talk about, it's bringing in two different cultures, really. Right. So I love to use the example of, and I think I actually picked this story up at a training, so it's not my story, but I use it quite frequently, where it was a blended family situation. They moved in, and the stepmom made a chicken salad, and she's very health conscious. So she made it with like alfalfa sprouts and on wheat bread and cut the crust off. And the son goes, "Oh my God," and picks up the sandwich and throws it against the wall and runs away. Right? And she goes, "Oh, he hates me. What did I do wrong?" And so, we had it's just having that discussion around, in our culture, here's what a chicken salad sandwich looks like. In our culture, here's what it looks like. And sort of, I think for the kids, it's modeling that through the dialogue. The kids are seeing them dialogue around this. And you have to have a sense of humor. You have to realize, I mean, even if you think about noise level or energy level, like different homes have different feelings, and sort of normalizing the fact that that there are differences and that's okay, I think is the goal. It doesn't necessarily have to be like, we're going to be this big, golden shining light of unit all the time, right?
The golden shining light of Brady, the Brady line. Yes, right.
Right.
Well, okay. So now you're married. One or both of the parents have remarried. And so for the children in this home with remarried parents, one of the issues I understand is this power structure. Who provides the rules, who maintains the rules, who deals with disobedience. Can you give any guidance on how to set that up?
Oh, it's so challenging. It's like blended family work to me is really, really, I don't know if you know, but there's a big movement going on right now. There's Jennifer Horvitz is also a fellow divorce coach who talks about relationships. There's a huge movement right now of people who actually are marrying, but they're choosing to have two separate homes for the kids.
Really?
Yeah, it's happening more and more. I mean, it actually happened. I think it's Girlfriend's Guide to Divorce that happened in that TV show, and it's kind of been skyrocketing. More and more people are doing that.
I love that show, by the way.
It avoids this kind of messiness, right? So here's the thing. I think, it depends on the situation. It depends on the example. In blended family, we have this saying, it's called nacho, like it's not your child. So you focus on your child, he focuses on his children. You come together over some family issues. And actually what I have some of my folks do is we actually make buckets and we write out the misbehavior or the act of the child. And then together we put in bucket A or non-negotiables. Those are the things that absolutely need a limit on. It doesn't matter who the parent is. That's like hitting, swearing, damaging property, right? Those are the things you get arrested for. And then on the third bucket are natural consequences. Those are things that maybe we want to be more hands-off. Maybe we are going to be a little bit more hands-off when the step siblings start fighting because they got to work it out between themselves, right? And there's no physical stuff going on. And then in between that middle, those are all the negotiable kind of behaviors. And that's where people tend to get in trouble. Right. So that's what I mean. I think blended families work, but they take a whole lot of time and effort and communication behind the scenes. So it's 1,000 times more work than your original biologically united family. It just is. Also, you got to figure the relationship that's the most at risk are the adults. They're the most likely to fall apart. Because unlike when you meet somebody and you date them and then you grow the relationship into marriage, these are two people that don't have a lot of common ground. They're jumping into family life. And that puts them at risk because they don't have that base to grow off of. Does that make sense?
It really does make sense. So I had one other step family coach on the show. I think her name was Judy Graybill about a year ago. Mm-hmm. And she was saying that step one, both parents, the biological parent and the step parent, really have to sit down and say, like you just said, what are our values? What are our values in terms of reprimanding, establishing control? Where are we both on this? And then when the biological parent is not around, and the step parent is and something happens, how much control does that step parent have about saying, no, wait a minute. No, you can't do that. Well, you're not my parent. You can't tell me. I think you kind of addressed this just now when you gave the bucket example, but the parents have to be solid with one another first, right? And stand as a united front in front of the kids. Mm-hmm. So the kids don't play one parent against the other, because in your listen, before divorce, you have your two biological parents. Don't we play our parents against one another?
Of course. It's human nature to try to get to yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, so that's, by the way, one of the other things that I would love to address before we wrap up. But I think another common mistake that people make post-divorce is they start looking at everything through the lens of divorce. So here's a really common example. A lot of, for example, teen girls are very close to dad, right? They go through, we call it the princess stage. And now they hit puberty and they're like, oh my God, I'm getting my period. I have to wear a bra. And they get closer to their moms. This is what happens in an intact family. And they tend to shut dad out quite a bit. And a lot of my dads, that's when a lot of my dads are in distress in divorced families. And they go, oh my gosh, I feel like now mom's like bad talking me. I feel like my daughter doesn't love me anymore. And I feel like, so some of my work is educating what would happen in an intact family, because if you're looking at that just through the divorce lens, you might miss that this is actually a typical developmental stage, right?
Right.
Or even the kids always wanting to be with their, like my daughter's 15. She doesn't want to see me. I'm like the biggest dork in her life right now, right? Just my mere presence annoys her, So it's like educating parents, like that's not about the divorce. That's about your child actually reaching out and branching out outside the home. We want to encourage that. So that's something that's really important, I think, for people to keep in mind.
And what if you marry somebody and bring them into the home and you actually really love them, but they're not very nice to your kids? What do?
Oh, no.
I mean...
Did I just tell you that I've been single for 4 years? I told you that, right?
Right.
Yeah, that's a no-go. I don't think, then there's always going to be that conflict. It's conflict right from the get-go.
So you see this happening, biological parent, you see your second spouse not doing very well with your children.
Mm-hmm.
The best case scenario, just in your best case advice, what should biological parent do?
So to me, like I was saying, maybe it's not a blended home. Maybe there is a relationship, but there's not residing together. That's a possibility.
Oh, okay. Back to we could have separate homes.
But here's the thing. You and I both know, and I'm telling you this as a therapist and a coach, if anyone takes anything away, we can't change people. We can't. People only change if they really want to change and they're willing to make a disciplined approach to do that. So it's not our job to convince somebody to be nice to our kid. It's not our job to convince somebody to like kids. It's not our job to change a person's perspective or viewpoint, right? Because then that's just setting you up for codependency and then misery later down the road. So, that's why for me, I'd be like, no, my child's priority, I know she's a pain in the ass sometimes. You don't have to love her every moment, but you have to love her enough to want to be part of our unit in a respectful way.
So years ago, I was doing a post-divorce mediation where the couple had 2 children, but one was already a major. So he was already in college and out of the house. The younger was a daughter and she was entering high school. She dearly loved both of her parents. And both of her parents remarried. Her father married somebody that she was very comfortable with and could easily function well in that home. Her mother married somebody she was not comfortable with at all, and it did not function well in their home. And mom was married. There's nothing she was going to do. Mother was not going to get divorced. So parents came to me first to talk about this because biological dad was moving to another county and it was time for the daughter to enter high school. And so the discussion was, should the daughter come to the other county and make the primary residence with dad and the new wife that had an easier environment for the daughter to live in, and then or stay in this county where they got divorced in, where the daughter had friends, but the daughter was not comfortable in the home at all. So, okay, so we had this big discussion. That was great. The next mediation, the daughter came in. Now, I am not a therapist. I rarely meet with children, only if the children say, no, I want to talk to the mediator. And this has only happened twice. So I try and be extremely careful the situations I get in. If I'm not qualified, I'm not qualified. I could do more damage than good. And I really try and be sensitive to this. So the daughter comes in and I said, well, I just want to speak to her alone for an hour. And then the second hour, we'll have both of you come in. So you sit out in the waiting room. So the daughter was very forthcoming about why she was uncomfortable with mom's husband, and Mom's husband was an attorney, a litigator. And if we know anything about litigators, they always have to win. And even if you want to talk about the salad or how the steak was cooked, the litigator will always be right. That was the type of, he was described as being that type of person. So it wasn't comfortable. Biological mom knew how to deal with it and accepted it because that was part of the relationship. But the daughter said, I don't want this in my life. So she explained this to me, and she was really clear. And she said, I don't care if I have to have new friends. That relationship that I have to live through in my mother's home is worse than having to find new kids when I go to high school. And you know how important friends are.
Right.
Having to break that news to Mom was one of the most painful moments in my career. So Mom and Dad the other partners weren't there. So Mom and Dad come in the room with daughter, and I said, would you please like to share what you told me? She said, oh no, you tell them. Yeah. I cannot be the one, again, parents, I cannot be the one to deliver this information. Because when you put a child in that position, right, choosing sides, and she loved her mother. Loved spending time with. Oh my God, it was so devastating. And so now I'm thinking 3 times this has happened to me, and it never works out. So I've never taken a case like this again. It never works out. Therapists need to be involved. And I don't think it works out for therapists either, having to deliver that information. And I just don't want to be the bad guy. And so I just said, well, Mom, she loves you to death and would spend as much time as humanly possible with you, but she's not comfortable with your new husband. And do you understand this? Can you at least understand this? And Mother could not. She was crushed. And there was nothing we could do at that point. And daughter actually moved to the other county.
Yeah.
As a therapist, what would you do?
I mean, I thank God she had you to advocate for her. I mean, I think as a therapist, it would be the same thing. Like, this is what your daughter's saying. What are your thoughts on this? How can we, it's all, my focus is on how do you meet your child's needs? They're obviously not being met, that she's willing to risk going to a different school system. Like, that's sad.
Okay, I love that. How do you meet your child's needs? That has to be the bottom line, doesn't it?
And I got to tell you, you know what? I really I want to go back to that thing I said before, because I think when people don't do their work, and I see this a lot, by the way, with my men too, it's not just women. It's just this serial dating that people do post-divorce, and it's people, whether it stems from lack of confidence that they can manage the house on their own, lack of confidence that they can parent on their own, that they can pay their own bills. Maybe they're still angry at their ex, like it's trying to unearth it, what's going on. But, there's kids I've worked with, and there's like 3 or 4 family adult step figures that have come in and out. And that to me is just so damaging to a child, and what does that teach them about what relationship is? What does that teach them about how to work through hard time? What does that teach them about stability?
Yes. Quickly, because we are coming to the close of our
I was rambling on and on.
No. You've given us so much great information. I just want to touch on your work as an anxiety coach, because first of all, we all have anxiety, divorce or no divorce, but divorce definitely brings it out. Do most people experience anxiety, do you think, during divorce at some point in time?
Oh, of course. Yeah. I mean, everything in your life is thrown up in the air, and you have to negotiate everything. So that's, I think the biggest fear is money, my relationship with my children. Where am I going to live? What are my friends going to say? What's my family going to say? Can I actually do this? Can I survive what am I going to do in my free time? It's a lot. So most definitely anxiety and depression goes hand in hand with divorce. I really encourage my folks to do a lot of mindset coaching. Like, what are you saying to yourself? What's your narrative? If you're walking around and your narrative is like, I'm a loser and I failed at marriage, well, that's going to impact how you are as a parent. It's going to impact your healing. It's going to impact how your life looks like post-divorce. So I really encourage folks to shake those narratives up into something that's more healing. Because if you're not experiencing anxiety going through divorce, I would say there's something, I would say that's more weird. Like, you know what I mean?
Yes, yes. And that's a really good tip, Catherine, that you just gave. Change the narrative in your head. If it's a negative narrative, you do have to change that, because we live according to the voices in our heads. We live according to what we tell ourselves about ourselves, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely. And I got to tell you, I mean, even in my own healing journey, and then I'll clam up, but like I said, I did years of therapy. Therapy really helped me put to peace my childhood and my traumas from my childhood and understand where I was at. But coaching really is so different. It's about healing the mind and body so you can move forward. And that's just like, I always use that example of, like, I would go to therapy when I was going through my custody battle, and my therapist would say, you know, he's a narcissist. He's out to get you. You got to get a better lawyer. And I'd come out of that therapy room and I'd be pissed. And I would start calling my attorney, and I probably wasted tens of thousands of dollars. Coaching's going to be like, all right, let's get out the anger here, and then let's contain it. And then let's figure out how we're going to communicate with your attorney where you're not wasting tons of money. And let's focus on what the big issues are. And we're going to let go and put away all the little issues, right? Does that make sense? And so for me, coaching was so healing, because I know it sounds obvious as you and I are talking about it. I didn't even know those were options on the table.
I get very upset when I hear people say what their therapist told them to do and think, A, about the legal system, and B, just about revving them up just into this negative emotional state. Aren't therapists supposed to help you feel better, calm down, be able to traverse the challenges in a much more positive way?
One would think. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Maybe every therapist needs a therapist, right?
Every needs a coach. We all need somebody, but you want to make sure you have the right person. So
yeah, no, coaching has such a positive aspect to it. It's all about moving forward, making it right, doing the best you can. I love coaching. And so with that, to end this episode, I'm looking at all these really cool training webinars that you have, leveraging your experience to become a certified coach. If anybody going through divorce wants to become a coach, you know, Catherine can help you. But you also have one that's not yet started. It starts on October 27th of this year, helping your clients avoid the 6 biggest mistakes in divorce.
Yes.
I want people to sign up for this. This has got to be a good one.
So I'm doing tons of, most people connect with me through Facebook. It's just my name, Catharine Blake. And I'm always offering free workshops on there. And then I have workshops through Zoom that are, webinars, and they do cost some money. We actually have one coming up. It's with 2 other coaches, and we're focusing on high conflict co-parenting. So if you get on my Facebook, you'll see the advertisement for that. I mean, I'm doing everything. I'm hosting social events for folks who are over 40. I'm hosting divorce retreats. We have a huge retreat coming up in New Hampshire. It's a 2-day retreat in April. Because I'm a firm believer, this is why I work with a team, that if people feel like they have a wraparound team of professionals, they feel contained and they feel safe and they feel like they're making the best decisions for themselves and their family. And that's my goal. And I want them to ace their life post-divorce. Women come back and they're like, I call my program is Diva Your Divorce, because they come back and they're like badass. They're like dressing differently. They're like dating successfully. They change their jobs. They change their friends. It's like, it literally touches on every piece of your life, divorce.
It really does. Divorce can be used as a new beginning, as a growth experience. Yes, there's grieving. Yes, there's a lot to learn, and learning is tough. But no, you nailed it, Catherine. I mean, this can be used to change your life in a very positive way if you know it can, and you allow it, and you surround yourself with a team of people who can help you make it happen. Like Absolutely. You and your team of people. So I want everybody, you're going to see this in the show notes, but Catherine has a unique spelling to her name, Catharine. Katherine Blake CDC, Certified Divorce Coach, Andover, Massachusetts, but who cares? I mean,
yeah, I work with people all over. Yep.
You're everywhere. Yep. Thank you so much. You were wonderful.
Thank you.
So helpful. I can't even tell you. Love that you gave us your time. And
I love you and I love your energy. And I feel like we connected right away. So that's awesome.
We did. Thank you. Me too. I feel the same way. And for all of you listening, as you know, you can connect with me through the amicableddivorceexpert.com. You can give me topic ideas that you would like. Please share this episode with your friends. Subscribe. I just feel that we have invaluable content with people like Katharine, and I just adore you. Thank you so much, Katharine.
Yeah.
And as always, everybody, have an amicable day.
That's our show for today. Thank you for joining us. Be good to yourselves, be kind to your spouse, and cherish your children above all else.